Commander Elias Grant stood before the massive gates of the Karathi throne hall. The structure looked less like a building and more like a living creature carved into stone. Enormous pillars twisted upward, lined with glowing veins of green, light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Every step closer made Elias feel smaller, as if the entire place was designed to crush the spirit of anyone foolish enough to enter. He had been briefed many times before this moment. The Karathi Dominion was not just another star empire. It was the power of this region of the galaxy. Dozens of species had already bent the knee to the queen who ruled it, and those who had not, well, their names were remembered only as ruins. And now, a single human stood at the doors of that throne room. Not a fleet, not an army, just one man. Elias adjusted his collar, ignoring the stares of the towering guards flanking him. The Karathi soldiers wore armor like molten metal, hardened into sharp curves. Their faces were hidden, but he could feel their eyes on him, scanning, judging, waiting for any sign of weakness. He walked forward when the doors slowly opened. The air changed as soon as he entered. The throne room stretched endlessly, filled with alien nobles seated on platforms floating like islands in the air. Colors shimmered in the air. Holograms, banners, living lights. Strange alien instruments played faint tones, harmonizing with the hum of the great chamber. At the far end, raised on a platform carved from black crystal, was the throne of the fair Karathi queen. She was overwhelming. The queen was taller than any human Elias had ever seen, her form wrapped in shimmering scales that reflected shades of silver and violet. Her crown was not made of metal but bone-like growths that extended naturally from her head, curling upward like horns. Her eyes glowed faintly, twin embers of gold that never blinked. She sat not like a monarch resting, but like a predator waiting. Every noble, every guard, every servant seemed to draw energy from her presence. She was the axis of the room, and Elias knew he had walked into the very center of power in this sector of the galaxy. Yet he did not bow. He had debated it during the long journey. Some advisors on Earth had told him, bow, show respect, survive. Others had argued, do not bow. If you bow, humanity bows with you. Elias had decided. He would not kneel. He would stand. The silence stretched. He could hear his own heartbeat. Finally, a voice smooth and sharp at the same time filled the chamber. So, the queen said, her tone carrying amusement and curiosity. This is the human envoy, the one who asked for an audience with me, though your people are barely known among the stars. Her words rolled through the chamber and laughter rippled among the nobles. Some of them hissed, some chuckled openly. To them, this was a show. Elias lifted his chin slightly. His voice was steady when he answered, yes, Commander Elias Grant, representing Earth. Thank you for receiving me. The queen tilted her head. Her golden eyes narrowed. You did not bow. It was not a question. No, Elias said. I came as an equal. Gasps filled the hall. Several nobles stood, offended. The tension in the air thickened like a storm about to break. The queen raised one hand and silence returned instantly. Her claws, long and sharp, tapped lightly against the armrest of her throne. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a low, rich sound that echoed in the chamber. Equal, she repeated, her voice dripping with amusement. A small world, barely past its first steps into the stars, stands before me and dares to speak of equality. Elias swallowed but did not back down. Because equality is not measured by the size of armies or the age of empires. It's measured by what we are willing to offer. The queen leaned forward slightly. And what does your little world offer me? Tribute? Resources? Soldiers? What could humanity possibly give that I do not already have? Elias paused. He could feel the weight of every gaze on him. He thought of the instructions his superiors had given him. Negotiate trade routes, seek non-aggression, do not provoke. But looking into those golden eyes, Elias understood something. If he played safe, if he acted weak, Earth would be forgotten. Worse, it would be consumed like so many others. The Queen respected strength, even if it was not physical. So he said something no one expected. Trust. The chamber went utterly silent. Even the floating instruments seemed to hush. The Queen blinked once, her golden eyes unblinking afterward. Trust? Yes, Elias said, stepping forward. His voice grew stronger with each word. Your empire rules with fear. Other species bow because they have no choice. They obey because they are forced. But humans, we don't break so easily. What we give, when we give it, is loyalty. Not because of chains, because we choose it. You don't have loyalty in this court, you only have fear. What I offer is different. The silence broke into laughter, harsh and cruel from the nobles, echoing like thunder. Some hissed insults in languages Elias didn't understand. A few leaned forward, eager to see how the Queen would punish him for his arrogance. But the Queen? She laughed again. Louder this time. Her voice carried through the hall like a storm, silencing all the other laughter. Her head tilted back, her teeth sharp as she smiled. Trust, she said slowly, savoring the word. You stand here before me and you offer me trust? As if you are the one with power to grant such a thing? The way she said it, Elias realized he had probably overstepped. His throat felt dry, but he forced himself to keep eye contact. Dare. Wasn't just an offer, Elias said. It was a challenge. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The entire chamber froze. The nobles leaned forward, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outrage. The guards tightened their grips on their weapons. Even the air itself seemed to pause, heavy with tension. And then, the Queen threw her head back and roared with laughter. It wasn't mocking. It wasn't cruel. It was genuine, deep, and terrifyingly alive. A challenge, she said between laughs. Her golden eyes sparkled with something Elias had not expected. Amusement, yes, but also curiosity. You are either the bravest fool I have ever met, or the most dangerous. Elias allowed himself the smallest smile. Maybe both. The Queen rose from her throne. The chamber shuddered as her towering figure descended the steps, each one echoing like a drumbeat. She stopped only a few feet, away from Elias, close enough for him to see the faint scars along her scales, the subtle glow of energy beneath her skin. She lowered her voice, though it carried across the hall. Very well, human. You intrigue me. Let us see if your trust and your challenge are worth my time. If you survive what comes next, then perhaps I will consider your offer. The Queen turned, her claws snapping once in command. Prepare the trials, she declared. The nobles gasped. The guards saluted. And Elias realized, in that moment, that he had not simply walked into a diplomatic meeting. He had just been thrown into a game of survival, one where the stakes were not only his life, but the future of Earth itself. Yet even with fear clawing at his chest, Elias straightened his shoulders, because the Queen had laughed and she had not dismissed him, and in her laughter he had heard something rare, possibility. The following day began with a sound like thunder. Elias woke inside a chamber far larger than any he had ever seen. The walls were not stone, not metal, but something alive, curved and pulsing faintly with light, like the inside of a giant seashell. A soft vibration traveled through the floor as if the whole palace itself was breathing. He sat up from the simple bedding provided. The Karathi had not treated him as a prisoner, but neither was he a guest. Guards had escorted him here the night before and left him without a word. Now the door opened with a hiss, and a tall Karathi noble entered. His scales were a darker green, his crown bone smaller than the Queen's but still imposing. His voice was cold and sharp. Human. The Queen commands you to face the trials. If you succeed, she may hear more of your words. If you fail, the noble's mouth curved into something between a smirk and a snarl. No one will remember your name. Elias stood, brushing dust from his uniform, His heart pounded, but his voice stayed calm. Then I suppose I'd better succeed. The noble's eyes narrowed and he turned sharply. Follow. The arena. The throne hall had been vast, but the arena was larger still. Elias walked out into a circle the size of several Earth stadiums combined. Thousands of Karathi filled the stands, their voices hissing, rumbling, shouting. The air shook with their excitement. At the far end, in a private box high above, the queen sat upon a smaller throne. Her golden eyes shone brighter than the lights of the arena. A voice boomed across the stadium, speaking in the Karathi tongue. The translation unit clipped to Elias's ear hummed, turning the words into English. The trials begin. The human who dares to challenge the queen will face the 3 tests: cunning, strength, and loyalty. Let all witness the truth of his claim. Crowd roared. Elias exhaled slowly. He had expected something like this. He had not expected so many eyes watching, waiting for him to fail. Trial 1. Cunning. The floor of the arena shifted. Plates of metal slid aside, revealing a labyrinth forming in front of him. Tall walls rose, blocking the view of the crowd. The booming voice returned. The first trial, the maze of shadows. Escape before the predators find you. Predators? Elias thought grimly. Of course there would be predators. He stepped inside. The walls shimmered faintly, and soon the light dimmed until the corridors were barely visible. His steps echoed. Somewhere ahead, something growled low and deep. He remembered his training. Humans were not the strongest species, not the fastest, but they were problem solvers. They adapted. At the first fork, Elias paused. One path smelled faintly of burned air. The other carried a cool breeze. Instinct told him the cooler air meant an exit, so he turned right. A screech ripped through the darkness. Something moved. Fast. A creature leapt, its body covered in spines, eyes glowing faintly. Elias ducked just in time, grabbing a loose pipe from the wall. He swung with all his strength. The impact sent the creature stumbling back, hissing. Sorry, friend, Elias muttered, backing away. He didn't need to fight it, he just needed to survive. Step by step, he mapped the labyrinth in his head. He noticed patterns. The floor panels vibrated slightly near dead ends while those leading forward stayed still. Using this, he navigated quickly, dodging more creatures, always staying just ahead of them. At last, he saw light ahead. The exit. He sprinted, heart racing, and burst out of the maze. The crowd erupted in noise, some cheering, some booing. To them, it didn't matter. The human had lived. From her throne, the queen tilted her head slightly. Her lips curved into a smile. Trial 2. Strength Elias barely had time to catch his breath before the arena shifted again. The floor split open, and a massive platform rose. On it stood a Karathi warrior easily twice Elias's size, carrying a blade as long as Elias was tall. His scales glowed faintly red and the crowd screamed his name. The voice boomed again. The second trial. Face the champion. Prove your strength. Elias's mouth went dry. He had no weapon, only his fists, and the broken pipe still clutched in one hand. The warrior charged, blade swinging in an arc that could have cut Elias in half. Elias threw himself sideways, rolling across the floor. The crowd jeered, calling him coward. But Elias wasn't trying to match strength with strength. That would be suicide. He studied the champion's movements. Each swing was powerful but slow. Each strike left the warrior slightly unbalanced. The next time the blade came down, Elias dodged closer instead of away. He jammed the pipe into a gap beneath the warrior's arm. The giant roared in pain, swinging wildly. Elias darted back, forcing the warrior to chase him. The battle turned into a dance. Elias never tried to hit hard. He aimed for weak spots, joints, gaps in armor, sensitive scales. He made the warrior waste energy, chasing a smaller, quicker target. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat stung Elias's eyes, but he didn't stop. Finally, the champion raised his blade high, roaring for the final strike. Elias lunged forward, slamming the pipe into the warrior's knee with all his weight. The giant staggered. His blade came down awkwardly, sinking into the arena floor and sticking. Elias didn't waste the moment. He climbed the warrior's back and pressed the broken pipe against his throat. Not to kill, just to prove he could. The crowd went silent. The warrior froze, then slowly lifted his hand in surrender. The arena thundered with noise. Half the crowd screamed in fury. The other half cheered wildly, and high above, the queen leaned forward, her golden eyes burning brighter. Trial 3. Loyalty. The arena floor cleared again. This time, 2 figures were brought forward. One was a young Karathi servant, trembling, clearly terrified. The other, Elias's stomach dropped. It was one of his own crew, Lieutenant Morgan, who had been captured when they first entered Dominion space. The voice boomed, "The third trial, loyalty, choose one to save, the other shall fall." Gasps echoed through the stands. Even the nobles seemed unsettled. This test was cruel even by Karathi standards. Morgan's eyes met Elias's. "Don't do it," he said, voice hoarse. "Save yourself." The Karathi servant shook, whispering pleas in their own tongue. Elias's chest tightened. He understood the trap. If he saved his crew, the Karathi would call him selfish. If he saved the servant, they would call him a traitor. Either way, he would lose. Unless... Elias stepped forward, his voice steady though his heart pounded. "No." The crowd murmured in confusion. The queen's eyes narrowed. "No? I won't choose," Elias said, "because loyalty isn't about abandoning one life for another. It's about protecting both, even if it costs you." The nobles hissed, angry at his defiance, but Elias raised his voice louder. "If you want to test my loyalty, then test it this way. Let both stand and I'll take their place. I'll face whatever punishment you intended for them. Alone." The arena went still. The queen rose slowly from her throne. The golden fire in her eyes blazed brighter than ever. Silence stretched for long moments, and then she laughed. It was not the mocking laughter of before. It was richer, deeper. It echoed across the arena, silencing every voice. "Interesting," she said at last. "Very interesting." She raised her hand. The guards released both Morgan and the servant. They stumbled away, alive and unharmed, the queen's gaze fixed on Elias. "You have passed my trials, human, not because you were the strongest nor the fastest, but because you dared to think differently. You dared to challenge not only my tests, but me." The crowd roared, not with mockery this time, but with awe. Elias stood in the center of the arena, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his face. He had survived. He had done what no one believed possible, and high above, the queen's laughter still echoed, carrying a promise of something more. The arena had gone quiet at last. The nobles left in groups, their whispers sharp as knives. The warriors withdrew and the crowds faded into silence. But the memory of Elias's victory, the human who had survived the queen's trials, remained, heavy in the air. Elias stood in the middle of the now empty arena, feeling both exhausted and alive. His uniform was torn, his body covered in bruises, and yet there was a strange lightness in his chest. He had not only survived, he had shown them something they had not expected from a human. Guards approached. For a moment, Elias wondered if this was the part where they quietly ended him anyway, but instead they bowed slightly, just enough to show respect without dishonoring themselves, and motioned for him to follow. They led him through high corridors, back into the palace. Torches lit the walls and the sound of distant music drifted through the halls. Finally, the guards stopped at a massive set of doors. "The queen wishes to speak with you," one said, his voice unusually respectful. Elias nodded, then stepped inside, an audience of 2. The chamber was not the throne hall. It was smaller, quieter, almost private. The walls shimmered like dark glass, reflecting the faint golden glow of the figure waiting within. The queen stood beside a long table carved from crystal. No throne, No crown, no crowd of nobles. Just her. For the first time, Elias saw her without the distance of ceremony. Her scales shimmered less in this light, and her posture, though still regal, was relaxed. "Commander," she said, her voice softer than it had been in the arena. "You surprise me." Elias managed a tired smile. "I've been told I'd do that, often." The Queen's lips curved upward. It wasn't quite a smile as humans understood it, but it was close. "You faced the maze with cleverness," she said, her golden eyes gleaming. "The champion, with resourcefulness. And in the final trial, you gave up your chance to win. You offered yourself in the place of others. That is not common in my dominion." Elias took a step forward. "That's what I meant when I spoke of trust. Strength can rule, fear can control, but neither lasts forever. Sooner or later, someone stronger comes along. But loyalty endures." The Queen studied him in silence. For a moment, Elias felt the weight of her gaze as though she could see through his skin into his very soul. Then, to his surprise, she laughed again, low and genuine. "You speak boldly for one so small," she said. "My nobles despise you, already. They think you tricked me into sparing you. Some whisper I should end you now before your words spread." "And you?" Elias asked carefully. The Queen's golden eyes burned brighter. "I want to hear more." A conversation. Of worlds, the Queen motioned for Elias to sit. A servant entered silently, placing strange dishes on the table. Crystalline bowls filled with glowing fruits, cups of liquid that shimmered like molten metal. Elias hesitated, then remembered his lessons. Refusing food in such a moment was an insult. He picked one of the glowing fruits, biting carefully. To his relief, it tasted sweet, like honey mixed with citrus. The Queen watched him, then spoke. "Tell me of your world. Tell me why humans fight, why they survive, why they dare to stand before a throne such as mine." Elias leaned back slightly. He had not expected this. Still, he spoke honestly. "Earth is small," he said. "We don't have the fleets or the technology that your people do, but we've survived because we adapt. When storms came, we built shelters. When predators hunted us, we learned to hunt them back. When we fought each other, we built peace. Again. We don't always win, but we always keep trying. That's who we are." The Queen listened quietly, her claws tapping lightly on the table. "And loyalty? You spoke of it as though it were your people's greatest strength." "It is," Elias said firmly. "Humans argue, we fight, we disagree. But when someone we care about is in danger, we protect them, sometimes even strangers. We make families, tribes, nations, not because of blood, but because of choice. We stand together." The Queen tilted her head, studying him. "Strange. In my dominion, loyalty is demanded, it is taken, not given. And yet it always fades. Nobles plot. Generals betray. Even family turns against family." "That's because fear doesn't last," Elias replied softly. "Trust does." The Queen's expression was unreadable. For a long time, silence stretched between them. Elias wondered if he had said too much. Then, slowly, the Queen leaned closer. "You are bold, human. Bold enough to face me without bowing. Bold enough to endure my trials. Bold enough to speak of weakness as though it were strength." Her golden eyes burned like fire. "I have ruled for many years. I have seen warriors beg for mercy, nobles sell their kin, allies betray for power, but you are different. I cannot decide yet if you are a fool or something more dangerous." Elias's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Maybe both." The Queen stared at him for a long moment. And then, for the third time since he had arrived, she laughed, rich, echoing, alive. Whispers of the court, but while the Queen found herself amused, not everyone in the Dominion shared her interest. In the days that followed, word spread quickly of the human who had survived the trials. The nobles whispered in the corridors. Some said the queen had gone soft. Others argued the human had tricked her. A few feared him, not for his strength, but for the way he spoke. Words could spread faster than blades, and the human's words of trust unsettled them. Elias felt their stares everywhere he went. Servants eyed him curiously. Guards looked at him with grudging respect. Nobles sneered, whispering threats as he passed. Yet each day he was summoned again to the queen's private chamber, and each day their conversations grew longer. The bond grows. Sometimes she asked of Earth, its oceans, its forests, its skies. Elias told her of mountains taller than clouds, of rivers that carved valleys, of storms that painted the skies with lightning. He spoke of music, of laughter, of how humans celebrated even after hardship. Other times, she asked of human leaders, how they ruled, how they earned loyalty. Elias told her of democracy, of leaders chosen not by strength but by trust, of people willing to follow because they believed, not because they feared. The queen listened, always. Sometimes questioning, sometimes mocking, but always listening. And sometimes she spoke of herself. She told him of the throne, of the endless burden of rule, of the way every smile in her court hid a knife. She spoke of her battles, of victories won but never celebrated. For every victory only bred more rivals. Elias realized, then something he had not expected. For all her power, for all her fearsome presence, the queen was lonely, surrounded by subjects, but never companions, feared by all, trusted by none. And slowly, carefully, a bond began to grow. Not friendship, yet not alliance, but something more fragile, mutual respect. A dangerous gift. One evening, after a long conversation, the queen stood and walked to a nearby pedestal. She lifted something small and metallic, a pendant glowing faintly with energy, and handed it to Elias. "This," she said, "is a token carried only by those I trust. It marks you as under my protection." Elias stared at it, stunned. "Why me?" The queen's golden eyes narrowed, her voice low. "Because you dared to give me something no one else has. You offered me trust freely, without fear. I wish to see if such a thing can survive in my dominion." Elias closed his hand around the pendant. It was warm, humming faintly like a heartbeat. "I'll prove it can." For a moment silence hung between them, and then the queen smiled. Not with amusement, but with something almost gentle. Shadows in the dark, but beyond that chamber shadows stirred. The nobles had seen enough. A human, a weakling from a minor world, now carried the queen's mark of protection. He survived the trials when he should have died. He dined with the queen in private. And worst of all, he planted dangerous ideas. Ideas of loyalty, trust, equality. Such ideas could spread. And so in hidden corners of the palace the nobles whispered and plotted. They sharpened their knives. They called in favors. They planned not just the end of the human, but something far greater. Because, if the queen truly listened to him, her dominion itself might begin to change. Elias, of course, knew nothing of these plans, but he felt in the queen's laughter, in her golden eyes, in the weight of the pendant she had given him, that he had begun something far larger than himself. Something dangerous, something powerful, something that could change the galaxy. Even in the darkest hours of the night, whispers crawled through its endless halls. Nobles schemed behind closed doors, guards sharpened blades in secret corners, and servants hurried quietly, carrying food and scrolls while keeping their heads low. And in those shadows, plans were forming. Plans meant to end the human who had dared to stand in the queen's presence as an equal. The first plots Elias had noticed the stairs long before. Every time he walked through the palace, nobles turned their heads and lowered their voices. Their eyes glowed with disdain, suspicion, and sometimes even fear. He knew the look. It was the same look corrupt officers had given him back on Earth whenever he refused to play their political games. But here, the danger was sharper. The nobles feared what he represented. Not his strength, not his cunning, but his words. Trust, equality, loyalty freely given. These were dangerous ideas in a court built on fear and dominance. So, one by one, the nobles began to gather. In secret chambers hidden deep beneath the palace they met. He must be removed, one hissed, his scales dark as night. The queen listens too closely, another agreed. Her laughter has grown softer. A human cannot change our ways, said a third, unless we let him live long enough to try. And so the nobles swore an oath. They would see Elias destroyed, not by open battle, for the queen's eyes were sharp, but by subtle hands, by shadows. The attempted poison. The first attempt came quickly. Elias sat in the queen's private chamber one evening, listening as she spoke of an ancient war her people had fought. A servant brought a tray of shimmering drinks, placing them carefully before them. The queen lifted her goblet but did not drink. Her eyes were too sharp for such carelessness. Instead, she watched Elias. Go on, she said. Elias hesitated. He had learned enough of her ways to know this was no casual command. Carefully, he lifted the goblet, the liquid glowing faintly, blue. He sniffed it, then took a small sip. At first, nothing. Then, a faint burning in his throat. The queen's golden eyes narrowed. She raised her claw, and in an instant the guard seized the servant. A cruel hiss echoed as they dragged him. Away. Poison, the queen said simply. Elias coughed, the burning fading quickly. Not strong enough, he muttered. The queen's lips curved into a dangerous smile. You survive again. For a moment, Elias thought he saw something in her gaze. Not just amusement, but anger. Not at him, but at those who dared to strike. At him under her roof. The whisper in the halls. The second attempt was more direct. Elias walked alone through one of the palace gardens late at night. Strange flowers glowed faintly, their petals shifting as if alive. He found the gardens calming. They reminded him of Earth's forests, though twisted and alien. That was when he heard the whisper. Human. He turned. A tall noble stood in the shadows, scales shimmering in the moonlight. Unlike the others, this one did not sneer. Instead, his eyes were sharp, calculating. You think the queen favors you, the noble said softly. But she cannot protect you forever. Already blades are being sharpened. Already your death is being planned. Elias stayed silent, studying him. The noble leaned closer. Leave. Take your ship, your crew, and go back to your little world while you still live. For a long moment, Elias considered his words. But then he shook his head. No. The noble's eyes narrowed. Why? Because leaving now would mean everything I said to the queen was a lie, Elias answered. If I spoke of trust, of loyalty, then I must stand by it, even when it's dangerous. That's what makes it real. The noble hissed in frustration. Then your blood will stain these halls. And with that, he disappeared into the shadows. Elias stood alone in the garden, his hand tightening on the small pendant the queen had given him. He knew then that the danger was not far away. The final trial in secret, the third attempt did not come as poison or as warning. It came as a trap. Elias was summoned by a messenger who claimed the queen wished to see him in a lower chamber of the palace. It seemed unusual, but the queen often called him at strange times, curious for his words. So Elias followed. The messenger led him through twisting corridors deeper and deeper until the palace above felt like another world. Finally, they reached a vast, empty chamber, and Elias knew. The messenger stepped aside. From the shadows, 3 Karathi warriors emerged, each armed with curved blades. Behind them stood a noble with dark green scales, his eyes glowing with malice. The queen is blinded by curiosity, the noble sneered. But we are not. Tonight, human, your story ends. Elias's heart pounded. He had no weapon but his wits. Yet he refused to let fear control him. Funny, he said, forcing calm into his voice. I thought the Karathi prided themselves on strength. 3 against 1 doesn't seem very strong, the noble hissed. Kill him, The warriors moved. The fight in the dark. The first warrior lunged, blade flashing. Elias ducked behind a pillar, the strike sparking against stone. He grabbed a loose shard of crystal from the floor, holding it like a dagger. The second warrior came from the side. Elias threw the shard, not to wound but to distract. It clattered against the wall, making the warrior turn just enough for Elias to roll away. He grabbed a fallen torch from the wall, swinging it with both hands. The flames licked the air, forcing the warriors to keep their distance. But he couldn't last forever. Their strength outmatched his. Then Elias remembered something. The pendant. The queen had said it marked her trust, her protection. He held it up high, shouting, "If you kill me, you betray the queen herself. Are you ready to face her wrath?" The warriors hesitated. For just a moment, their loyalty to the noble clashed with their fear of the queen. It was enough. Elias swung the torch again, striking one across the chest. The warrior stumbled back, roaring. The second hesitated too long, and Elias rammed the torch into his face. The third growled, moving in, but then the chamber doors burst open. The queen's wrath. The queen herself stood in the doorway, golden, fire blazing in her eyes. Behind her came guards, dozens of them, weapons drawn. The nobles froze. The warriors lowered their blades instantly, terror flashing in their eyes. The queen stepped forward, her voice low and dangerous. "In my palace," she said, each word echoing like thunder. "In my halls. You dare to spill blood without my command?" The noble stammered, bowing low. "Your Majesty, we only sought to protect you from his lies." Silence. The single word cut through the chamber like a blade. The queen's gaze swept over the scene. The broken torch in Elias's hands, the blood on the floor, the fear on every face. Then she turned to Elias. For a moment, her expression softened. Then she looked back at the noble. "You speak of protection," she said coldly, "but what I see is betrayal." The noble dropped to his knees, begging for mercy. The queen raised her claw, and with a single command, the guards seized him. The warriors, too, were dragged away, their protests silenced. When the chamber was clear, only Elias and the queen remained. The quiet. After. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Elias lowered the torch, his body trembling with exhaustion. "You knew this would happen," he said softly. The queen's golden eyes burned, but her voice was quiet. "Yes, the nobles fear you. They fear what you represent." "And you?" Elias asked carefully. The queen studied him, then slowly she stepped closer. "I feared you too," she admitted. "At first, but not anymore." Her hand brushed lightly against the pendant still hanging from his neck. "You carry my mark, and now you carry my trust." Elias met her gaze, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "Then I'll prove I deserve it." For a moment, neither spoke. The queen's golden eyes softened, just slightly, and in that silence, something unspoken grew stronger between them. Respect, trust, and perhaps something even deeper, though neither dared name it yet. The shadows scatter by morning. The palace was buzzing. The nobles who had plotted against the queen's will were gone, their names erased from the records. The story spread quickly. The human had survived another night, not by luck, but by the queen's protection. Some nobles still whispered, still hated him, but others began to watch with curiosity instead of scorn. And the queen herself? She summoned Elias again that day, and the next, and the next. Each time, their conversations grew longer, their bond stronger. But both knew the danger was far from over, because in a court built on fear, trust was not just rare, it was a threat powerful enough to shake an empire. The palace of the Karathi queen was alive with movement. Servants rushed along polished corridors, guards patrolled the high towers, and nobles whispered in the shadows. Yet amid all this, one event captured every eye, every thought, every breath. The human, Commander Elias Grant, had been summoned to the Great Council chamber. This was no private audience, no quiet conversation. This was the heart of Dominion power, the gathering of every noble, every advisor, every officer in the Karathi Empire, and Elias would stand before them all. The Great Council. The chamber was vast, more immense than any arena Elias had faced. It stretched so far he could barely see the edges. Floating platforms rose in tiers, each holding dozens of nobles. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting centuries of power and tradition. At the far end of the chamber sat the queen, her throne raised above all others. Her golden eyes glimmered like molten fire, and the weight of her presence pressed down on the entire room. Even the nobles seemed smaller under her gaze. Elias's hands tightened on the pendant she had given him. It had become more than a token. It was a promise, a symbol of trust. And he knew that today, he would need every ounce of courage he possessed. Deep silence fell as he stepped into the center of the chamber. All eyes turned. The whispers died. The queen's voice rang out, calm and commanding. "Human, speak." The proposal Elias lifted his chin, meeting the golden gaze of the queen. His voice, though steady, carried clearly throughout the chamber. "I came here to offer more than words. I came to offer an alliance." The nobles gasped. Some leaned forward, eager to hear his audacity. Others scowled, already plotting how to oppose him. "Alliance?" one noble finally asked, voice sharp as a blade. "With a human? You dare?" Elias did not flinch. "Yes, with a human. Because we bring something more valuable than soldiers or fleets. Something that your dominion rarely sees. Trust, loyalty, and cooperation freely given." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We offer partnership, not subjugation, equality, not obedience. Together we can protect what we hold dear, explore new worlds, and face threats that neither of our species could face alone." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some laughed. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But high above, the queen remained, silent, studying him carefully, the test of the council. The queen rose slowly, golden eyes blazing. Her claws tapped against the armrest of her throne, echoing through the chamber. "You speak boldly, human. Yet words alone are not enough. The Dominion has seen many promises, many alliances, and all have failed. Why should I believe yours?" Elias straightened. He had expected this question. He had thought about it countless times during the journey to the throne, during the trials, during the nights when he couldn't sleep. "Because I have already proven my loyalty to you," he said. "I have faced your trials, survived your traps, and protected the lives of those you entrusted to me. I have not bent, I have not betrayed, I have not run. If my words mean nothing, let my actions speak for them." A hush fell over the council. Even the noblest of the nobles seemed taken aback. For the first time, many of them could not scoff or sneer. The human had not simply survived, he had endured. And in his endurance, he had shown something unfamiliar. Courage without fear, strength without domination, loyalty without condition. The queen's decision. For a long moment, silence hung between the queen and the council. The only sound was the faint hum of energy coursing through the chamber. Then the queen laughed. It was a sound that echoed like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Not mocking, not cruel, but rich, alive, and powerful. "Very well," she said. Her voice carried through the chamber, stopping every whisper. "I accept your offer, human." Gasps filled the room. Nobles blinked in shock. Some dropped to their knees, overwhelmed by the sheer audacity of the announcement. Others whispered warnings to each other, but the queen's eyes silenced them all. "You have spoken truth. You have acted without deceit. And in doing so, you have shown me what no other envoy has, the value of humanity. This alliance will begin now." Elias felt a rush of relief and disbelief. He had not expected such immediate acceptance, and yet here it was, the culmination of every challenge, Every trial, every moment of risk he had faced. Reactions of the nobles. Not all were pleased. Some nobles muttered quietly to each other, plotting as always. But many more were curious. Humans had never entered the Dominion as equals, never stood in front of the Queen and been heard. And now, one human had done so, not by force, but by daring to speak with honesty and courage. Whispers spread through the council. He survived the trials. The Queen trusts him. He dares to speak of loyalty and trust, and she listens. Perhaps humans are more than we believed. Even among those who opposed him, a grudging respect began to take root. Elias had changed their perception. He had shown that a species considered small and weak could possess qualities stronger than armies. The new alliance. The Queen descended from her throne, approaching Elias directly. The chamber seemed to shrink around her presence. She stopped, just a few feet away, golden eyes locked on his. You carry my trust, human. And now you carry my command. Together, we will shape the future of the Dominion and of your world. Elias bowed slightly, not from fear but from respect. Thank you, Your Majesty. I will not fail you, nor the people who will rely on this alliance. The Queen's claws brushed lightly against his shoulder, a gesture that in Karathi culture was both acknowledgement and protection. Then rise, Commander. Your journey is only beginning. A cheer erupted through the council chamber. Humans and Karathi alike would remember this day, the day an outsider stood before the Queen and was heard, and the day the Dominion opened its doors to a new kind of power, partnership, the promise of the future. As Elias left the council chamber, he felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. Earth was now tied to a galactic empire far older and stronger than he had imagined. Mistakes would be costly, failures even more so. Yet he also felt hope. Hope that humans could demonstrate the values that made them different. Hope that the Dominion, guided by the Queen's wisdom and humanity's courage, could achieve something none had dared dream before. And high above, the Queen watched him leave, her golden eyes thoughtful. There were still challenges to face, still dangers to overcome, but she knew one thing clearly. The human had earned her trust, and in that trust lay the seed of a future she had never expected. Whispers across the stars. News of the alliance spread quickly. Across the Dominion, across human worlds, across distant stars, the story of the human who had walked into the throne of a galactic queen spread like wildfire. Many doubted it, some mocked it, but more than a few paused, considering the possibility that humans, small and fragile as they seemed, carried qualities that could change the galaxy. Elias stood in the palace gardens that night, looking up at the stars. The pendant the Queen had given him glimmered softly in the moonlight. He could feel the weight of history in his hands. The galaxy was wide, full of danger, full of opportunity. And for the first time, humans were not just observers, they were players. The human who changed the Dominion. In the months that followed, the alliance grew stronger. Trade routes opened, knowledge flowed between worlds. The Karathi began to see the value of humans' ideas, not just their actions. Elias continued to meet with the Queen, their bond deepening. Together they navigated political storms, external threats, and internal disputes. And through it all, the human's words and actions shaped the course of history in ways the Dominion had never imagined. Whispers in the halls changed tone. From doubt to awe, from fear to respect, from scorn to admiration. The human who had been small, weak, and underestimated had walked into the heart of power and emerged not just alive, but victorious. And high above, in her golden throne, the Queen laughed. This time it was not at him. It was with him, a new dawn. The stars outside the palace burned brightly, endless and infinite. Elias knew the path ahead would not be easy. Challenges awaited. Enemies lurked. Decisions would come that could shake worlds. But for the first time, he felt certain of one truth. Humanity had a place among the stars. Not as slaves, not as pawns, not as spectators, but as equals. And in the laughter of a queen, in the warmth of trust, and in the courage of choice, the galaxy had already begun to change, because one human had dared to speak, to act, and to trust. And the queen had said simply and clearly, "All right, I accept."